Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and more Wilds talk. Today we're talking about the big topic of, is Wilds still too easy, as people once saying? Well, it's a bit of a familiar, repetitive topic, isn't it? Rise was too easy at launch, Sunbreak was way harder by comparison. Some people might consider that actually an overcorrection at a certain point. But was it just Rise? Well, no. And I'm not even going to reference World. Let's go all the way back to Freedom Unite. 13 years ago, people had the same complaints and the same topics were being brought up on old forums. That was 2nd gen, we're in 6th gen now. And hey, Freedom Unite is commonly looked back as one of the most brutal Monster Hunter games at this point. Yet the same familiar complaining about difficulty was happening all the way back then. Something different is happening here though. In what we're used to being, high rank versus G rank or master rank being that big jump in difficulty, Wilds, it is different. In Wilds, they've been reacting to feedback and making big changes significantly faster than normal. This is the most updated version of Monster Hunter that we've seen, at least in terms of their response and changes and the time that's taken. We've never seen them do like a beta like they've done and then make massive changes to weapons like they did. And then we saw, say, the May update with more weapon changes. More weapon changes in Title Update 2. We got more coming in August. This is the type of stuff you might wait until an expansion to see changes. And we certainly didn't have to wait until the expansion to see posts like this in regards to difficulty. So what has happened? Well, the difficulty of Wilds has ramped up in 3 major ways. You've got enemies or monsters with increased health and damage. You've got a new concept, which is a big deal as we'll discuss, which is wound resistance. And then, the newer monsters being introduced in the newer updates, there being more sort of mechanically challenging fights. What was the most difficult thing you could do in Wilds at its launch? Well, I think it's fair to say like the highest star level and difficulty of Arkveld and Gore. Those were the biggest challenges, and a lot of people felt that Gore was the biggest challenge rather than Arkveld. However, there was a lot of opinion that the game overall was too easy. The fact that people didn't really understand the star difficulty meant that people were doing 3-star monsters and thinking, oh, that's the hardest monster in the game, that's Gore everyone's worried about, but it was actually a 3-star version you dealt with. The star level does increase health, but it also greatly increases the damage the monster does by a noticeable increase. And so 5-star Gore compared to 3-star, it's a bit different. So that initial reaction to Wilds being too easy was definitely overblown, but I still think it was fair due to other aspects outside of just the gameplay. The fact is, the 2 challenging monsters in the game were Arkveld and Gore. That's literally just 2. All of the tier 3 monsters should have been more challenging. I think that's fair to say. So the 4 apexes were too weak and too much of a pushover. There was a lot of feedback about that, right? So things changed. But before then, we had Title Update 1 drop, which came pretty quick by the way, where we had, of course, the high rank version of Shia, which plenty of people feel should have been in the game at the start, and I can easily agree with that. But we had a pretty incredible addition that was the 8-star tempered mizutsune, where we didn't just get mizutsune, we got like this weird version of Soulseer, with some of the moveset being very Soulseer. So instead of just getting Mizu in the first update and everyone being kind of disappointed by that, they gave us something much more interesting and much more difficult. We saw in the first week a lot of people posting clips and being like, whoa, Mizu is really scary because they're getting one-shot by his backflip slam. I also found that Zoshie hit those notes of like a satisfying, progressive, interesting fight. I found it harder in multiplayer than in single player, by the way, due to people being carted by the crystal explosions and not knowing how to deal with that. That was a more mechanically demanding fight, introducing something interesting where you shed the skin, the shell of the target, opening up better hit zones. Then as we understood more, we started changing the way we were crafting our artian weapons, having a bit of element on it, not committing to it, and dropping all of the status stuff that we were doing at the time. It caused a bit of a meta shift for that fight in particular, but also, element weapons and the way they're run today, actually. So, the first title update introduced 2 more challenges. So now you've got Arkveld and Gore, you've got Zoshie and Mizu, kind of relatively in a similar bracket of difficulty. But there were still people that felt it wasn't enough. And at that point, that was still fair enough. Then we got the May update, middle of Title Update 1, another update, where we got the new 8-star versions of the tempered apexes, and Gore in particular being super scary. Now, Gore 8-star in his current monster version is getting towards Fatalis level of health, by the way. It's not only a super dangerous fight in terms of the damage and the combos and the aggressive nature of that monster, but just how much health he has to get through. which is obviously ridiculous in a 4-man player environment. In regards to the apexes, I would say they've done a good job of bringing them up in terms of challenge and interest in that way, so they feel a little bit more satisfying where they should be. But the big topic here is wound resistance and how we're seeing them change something in an interesting way. Based on the feedback, and my god did I read a lot of this at the time, wound resistance was a big topic, where wounds would open too easily across the body of a target. And if it's a tempered monster, you were able to open those special blue wounds, the tempered wounds, and get even more. Any wound with a focus strike with most weapons would cause a kind of interruption, holding the monster in place while you do your special animation. In a multiplayer environment, that just meant your team could just start free DPSing, and the fact that you could do it so often during a fight was very impactful. The fact that some wounds, say they're on legs, would cause a knockdown, the DPS and burst of that wound being popped with whatever way, that was also massive in causing knockdowns. And it was ultimately affecting the fight in a major way where you're not dealing with the mechanics, you're just seeing the monster for most of the fight. So even if it was super scary with crazy damage and stuff, if it can't get up and fight you, it's not that scary. So, the addition of wound resistance to these 8-star monsters, and then of course later when we look at Title Update 2, had a massive impact in the flow and the way that Wilds works. And I think anyone complaining about difficulty in Wilds right now might not have played these fights or experienced this really relevant change just yet. Another quick topic obviously would be the arena quests and arch-tempered monsters. You had the arena quest for Doshagama, which, there was a bit of controversy at the time. There was a lot of cheaters taking the top, 5,000 spots. So they had to change that system to be, if you kill the monster within this time, you're going to get an A ranking and then all of the best rewards. People were still pretty mixed on the response to that though, whether the requirements were too easy or way too hard. We look at Arch-Tempered Ray as a fight in difficulty. I think that was really fun. Obviously we had new move sets where he's doing the electric blast under himself and then from the air in a combo. Very scary in multiplayer, but also the damage and the health pool matching that concept too. This was one, again, that you needed to beat in a time, and it does feel like it's kind of impossible to satisfy everyone. I think they've been pretty fair on those timers. I think there's a good feeling of beating them, and it's a reasonable challenge. Whereas a kind of time, that makes it easier to get the A rank would have been bad, in my opinion. Could they have made it a bit harder in general on these times? Maybe, but I think it's fine. And currently we have the arena quest as well from mizutsune at the moment. If you're looking for a challenge to do, it's in the game at this moment. And in Title Update 2, obviously we've got Arch-Tempered duna coming soon. But at this exact moment, the Title Update 2 monsters are Seregios and of course Legaicrus. Now, the Legaicrus has turned out to be a pretty fun spectacle fight. We're seeing the speedrunners and maximizing gameplay actually preventing Legaicrus from going to the final area, from doing the underwater section, which is a time waste. I saw from some speedrunners that they're not going to learn and practice Legaicrus because they don't want to deal with the spectacle part, the underwater. Only for the people that actually did it and actually tried to be able to completely skip that. Making use of, I think it's area 14 with the double ruins drop if you do explosions, or say gunlance can drop that with its own explosion. There's a boulder to pull down when it's swimming on the way to its nest to give you extra DPS time. You got flash pods and lure pods to force it to stay longer than it might normally do. So if you're a good enough player, you absolutely don't have to do that section. And so there's actual big reward for that fight through skill. That's pretty cool. Now, Steve, Seregios in particular, has been that point of problem. People actually complaining for the first time here that something might be a little bit too hard. Or, as well, people being like, this is amazing, I'm so glad you made it this hard. There's a few sides to Seregios. Obviously his aggression and pace, the big jump slam combos that go again and again and again, the tight DPS windows actually affecting the charge attacks. So your switch axe, maybe your greatsword, getting those charge attacks off is quite hard against Seregios because he's so quick. Say you're a hammer or hunting horn player, you want to build up a lot of KO on the monster's head, right? You can't really do that with Seregios. He's bouncing around a lot, but you also want to be targeting the legs rather than the head because that's the best hit zone. It changes the flow and usual approach of a fight. Finally, on top of all of that, the bleed of this version of Seregios is pretty scary. I was talking to Josh about it and we both don't really remember bleed being as scary as it is here. Like 5th gen bleeding didn't seem like a big deal, something you could kind of ignore. And with the bleed being a threat on so many attacks, obviously he can use his tail to whap them at you or shake them out from his neck. But it's the claws and the combos that seem to trigger it on me the most. And since it hurts so badly, it's a good thing you can just use rations and there are quite a few options for cleansing it. So you gotta be prepared and prepped for Seregios. It's a pretty big success. So yeah, Wilds, in my opinion, has had the biggest and best responsive feedback that we've seen, including weapons as well as monster balance changes. I think it's very reasonable to think, based on how good they've been about feedback, that the big difficulty change for monsters has been part of that. But you know, there is that other side of this where you might ask, is Wilds getting too hard too fast? Maybe right now it's in a great state, but it's only going to get harder, right? Since some monsters are already touching on that master rank challenge kind of feel, is this going to go towards an overcorrection? In my opinion, no. I think it's what a certain amount of people want. They want that challenge, they want that satisfaction. And if you're someone that doesn't want that, but you still want to fight the monster and have the same experience, you have the 3-star version right there. You can safely do that and ignore the 5-star version, which is a pretty cool compromise. It's funny, the first version and understanding of the star system, I found it quite annoying, having to rest and reset to get the star version you're looking for. But overall, the system has actually turned out to be quite a clever trick for the people that want easier or harder versions of the same fight. I do hope the challenge continues to increase and be really memorable because of that in the remaining title updates. But yeah, the jump forward has been pretty insane from launch to now, especially with a big detail of wound resistance. Maybe they can be more gradual with that progression again, we'll see. But it's definitely been funny to see Wilds being called the easiest Monster Hunter game, only for there now to be complaints about Seregios and Gore in their current hardest states. Quite the successful turnaround. So if you haven't played Wilds in a while, you might want to prepare yourself for a bit of a jump in that difficulty. But yeah, let us know what you think. How are you feeling about the difficulty of Wilds? Do you like the way it's going? Or is it still too easy? Let us know your thoughts, but until next time, I've been Hollow, you've been you, and thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.